Welcome to The Last Generation, the podcast where lived experience meets lasting change. I'm your host, Donna Simmons, author of Ashes to Flame, Transforming Trauma into Purpose, also a survivor, advocate, and truth teller. Hey friends, welcome back to The Last Generation, where we are transforming trauma into purpose. Today's episode is part 2 of our Parenting on Broken Ground series. And let me tell you something. If part 1 cracked the door open, today we are kicking it wide open. Because today we're talking about co-parenting as step-parents in a blended family. Listen, parenting is already messy. Parenting with trauma history, that's next level messy. But when you step into co-parenting someone else's child while they're parenting yours, that's where the ground really shakes. In our home, we've got 2 kids. My daughter is now 18. My husband's son is 8. 2 completely different stages of life, 2 completely different sets of needs. And both of them, honestly, have had to wrestle with what it means to suddenly be in a blended family. And that's what I want to talk about today. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the unexpected, beautiful moments that make it all worth it. Now, because you know me, if you've been listening for a while, you know we're not going to keep this surface level. We're going to go deeper. We're going to talk about the parts of us that show up when we're step parenting. That's the lens of internal family systems, or IFS. If you're new to it, here's the quick version. Every one of us has parts that protect us, parts that carry our wounds, parts that try to manage how we're seen. And every one of those parts comes to the table when we parent and when we step parent. So buckle up. Because today you're going to hear me share our journey. And I'll be weaving in a candid conversation between my husband and I as well. Together, we're opening the door on what co-parenting in a blended family really looks like. So let's start with the reality. Blending families is hard. It's not the Brady Bunch. It's not Pinterest perfect. When we first came together, my husband's son was 6 and still very much in that stage of wanting consistency, routine, and reassurance. He was dealing with loyalty binds, how to stay connected with his mom while also figuring out how to trust me. My daughter was 15, quickly approaching more and more independence, right? But independence doesn't mean immunity. She trusted about at the same level that I did, virtually non-existent. And here's the truth. No matter how much love you bring into a blended family, the kids still feel grief. The grief of what used to be, even if what used to be wasn't healthy. For my husband's son, at 6 and 7 years of age, it was confusion. He was reluctant at first to see me as really having a meaningful place in our home as another parent. And sometimes that meant pushing me away, not because of who I am, but because he didn't know it was okay to accept me. And if you're a step parent listening to this, hear me loud and clear. It's not personal. Their resistance, their testing, their silence, it's not really rejection. It's their own survival. It's their way of trying to figure out where it's safe to land. Now let's talk about us as the parents. Because here's the deal. You don't just marry the person, you marry into the parenting. We had to figure out quickly what's my approach, what's Chris's approach, where do we overlap, and where do we need to back off? And let me be really honest. I've internalized a lot of our misalignments or even the unresponsiveness of my stepson to my feedback as rejection of me. And that's where IFS comes in. Because when I paused and really looked at it, I realized it wasn't even about his son. It was my protector part, the part of me that wanted to be accepted, because if I could feel that my efforts were embraced and that my stepson was receptive to me, well, that felt like security, like I was doing something right. But perceived rejection, oh, that felt like an earthquake. And that insecurity could make me doubt even my husband's love and commitment if he didn't see the situation exactly as I did. And that's the inner traffic jam, right? Our parts colliding with each other and colliding with our kids. And if we're not aware of that, suddenly we're reacting instead of parenting. So here's the coaching moment. Check yourself before you react. Pause and ask, what part of me is showing up right now? And then ask, is this really mine to take on and internalize? Or am I crossing into my own wounds when it's this kid that needs the reassurance and even sometimes space to process? Because here's the truth. Blended families work best when step-parents respect boundaries with each other as well as the kiddo, but also show up as a consistent, safe presence. Not overbearing, not absent, steady. So let's get real about what this has looked like for our kids. For his son, there was this constant pull, wanting to be there for his mom and feeling guilty if he lets his guard down with me. That's the loyalty bind. And if you're a step-parent, you've probably felt it too. It's this invisible wall that says, I can't like you too much because it'll hurt the other parent. For my daughter, it looks different. Sometimes it's testing boundaries. Sometimes it's throwing up walls. And sometimes it's flat out saying, I don't want him here. And that stings. But that's not about my husband. It's about the scared part inside my daughter that doesn't want to be disappointed. And then there's the sibling dynamic, because let's be honest, a 10-year age gap is no joke. Sometimes it feels like they're in two different worlds entirely. One's thinking about college and independence, and the other's worried about which Lego set to build next. But again, here's the key. Kids have parts too. They've got a scared part, an angry part, a loyal part. And if we only respond to the behavior without seeing the part behind it, we miss the chance to genuinely connect. Patience is the long game here. You can't rush trust. You build it one moment at a time. So let's listen now to a conversation between Chris and I where we talk about transparency and showing up for our kids and how this relates to our own experiences growing up. I have tried to be very intentional throughout our relationship, whether it was in the beginning, middle, where we are now, of being very transparent about either, how I feel, the things that I'm triggered by, the things that I struggle with, my history. But what I've realized is that I was still only going so deep with that transparency early on, right? Because there's been so much more that starts to come up the closer that you get with someone, and especially when we start living together.
Sure.
And I think what was uniquely challenging for us, and I say uniquely, I mean, it's very common for a variety of families, but we did become a blended family.
Mm-hmm.
I had a daughter in her early 20s, and then Willow, who you have been helping me to raise the past few years, is about to turn 18 now. And then, of course, you have Harrison, who is 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So we've got these kids at these different ages. Fortunately, they have gotten along extremely well with each other. But it's also been interesting to try to navigate how we approach co-parenting together, especially when, there are like, I've been a mother of basically adults and Harrison's still very young. And so, I certainly have my ways kind of set about how I navigate parenting. And I do think overall we've done a really good job of blending that together. But I think whether it's parenting or relationships themselves, those old wounds that we carry with us from our early life start to come forth. And so I would find myself doubting my ability in one way, shape, or form. And that would trigger an insecurity that would then make me make up this narrative in my head of how this was going to go.
Sure.
And who you were really going to turn out to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, going back to just kind of the co-parenting piece, and we've had several conversations around with Harrison specifically, because I think me coming in with Willow, I've tried to be more of a support model. I knew coming in that at 15, almost 16 years old when I met her, that our relationship was going to have to be a little bit different. I was going to have to come in. If I was going to build any kind of relationship with her, I was going to have to come in as a support role, but not as a parental figure initially. I was going to have to come in and show her that I supported her, show her that I was there for her, but not necessarily be the one to be the authoritarian person, the authority in the house right out of the gate. I wasn't coming in to try to change how she lived, how you parented. There were some challenges along the way, because there were certainly things that caught my eyes as how the dynamic between the two of you that I thought needed some adjustment. And we've addressed those over time. But at the same time, I was more focused on making sure that I was filling my role as Harrison's father, where I wasn't just pawning my responsibilities as a father off on you because you were now in the household and in the family as well. I think where I went wrong early on was I was clinging too much to that, to try to not feel like I was just pawning the responsibilities off onto you, to where you didn't feel like I would trust you with those things, or that I wanted you to be involved. And that wasn't really it at all. It was much more that I wanted you to see that I was a devoted father and a devoted husband, and that I was a family man, and I wanted to do my part in the family, not just as, now that we're married or now that we're in this relationship, I expect you to step in and be the mom,
right?
Just do all the mom things and whatnot. And what I did was I held those cards too close, which made you feel like I didn't want your help and I didn't need your help. And what I was trying to do was not make you feel like that I just expected it of you. So rather than, it took us a while to really have a conversation around that. And we've had several conversations around that because I think there are times where I still hold those a little close. And again, it's because I want to be involved, but I also think that we have found ways to where your role as his stepmother is very much seen and very much shows how involved you are as a co-parent in his life. Some things that you've been engaged or that you've stepped up to as far as helping change his dietary habits, something that I wasn't really good at. He was a very picky eater out of the gate, and it took us the last 12, 14 months now to really get him to start trying new foods. And that's very much came from you pushing us to do that, and you pushing us to not be so willing to just give him the things that he is used to or the things that he likes. And I think that was something that shows just how involved you are, how wonderful of a mother you are, and how you wanted to be engaged and wanted to feel like you had a role in his raising as well.
Yeah.
I think that over time, we are finding more and more ways to do that without it just feeling like I'm just skipping out on my role and, I'm going to do the things that I want to do while you're at home being the mom. That's not our relationship.
No, not
We're
at all.
We very much co-parent, but we're very much a partnership.
Exactly.
it's not always the case, but if you are cooking, I'm usually doing something around the house.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, or if I'm cooking, you're usually one to jump in and help out.
Mm-hmm.
That is when you let me cook.
That doesn't happen often.
But I also will jump in to help out with the dishes, or I'll jump in to help out with whatever else is going on, or maybe I'm out mowing the grass while dinner's happening, whatever. We find ways to make sure that we're partners and that we are, that we share the workload in the house. We share the workload outside of the house, whether it's being parents, whether it's, we are very attentive to the children's needs. We try to make it to every event we can for the children and so forth. And so we, through all of those actions, we build on our partnership. We build on the fact that we can bounce things off of each other. We can ask of each other, where both of us came from a place where asking for something didn't feel natural at all. And we just felt like we had to do it all.
Exactly.
Hey, real quick, I've got something for you. If trust in your relationships has ever felt impossible, I know what it's like to want connection, but feel scared to let anyone in. And that's why I created the Trust Blueprint. It's a trauma-informed guide to help you rebuild trust, set boundaries, and show up fully in your relationships. And this isn't just for you. Supportive partners will learn how to meet you where you are with patience, compassion, and understanding. Real healing doesn't happen alone. It happens together. The Trust Blueprint. Rebuild trust, reconnect with love, and start feeling safe again. Visit traumatopurpose.com and click on the Self-Paced Learning tab to learn more and get your download today.
On top of building this fake volcano for months, I give my daughter Smarty Pants vitamins to support her brain health. So her science fair project sounds more like and less like. And while I may say it's not a competition, of course it's a f***ing competition. Choose Smarty Pants vitamins to support your kids' brain health and save the science fair. Shop on Amazon, smartypantsvitamins.com, or at Target today.
If this were a Reese's TV ad, you'd be staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup. And sure, my voice is peanut buttery smooth, but still, you need to see the peanut butter cups, right? No? I can really just say Reese's and you'll go get some? Okay, Reese's. 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 Really working, actually. Reese's. Reese's. I'm on to something. Reese's. 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 Reese's.
And going back to what you said about early on in our relationship, you kind of holding a lot of those responsibilities that you had for Harrison kind of close to the vest. I get that. And one of the things that I have respected so much about you is that you are very clearly a very dedicated father. You've been that way to Willow since you first entered the picture with her, as well as everything that I've seen from you with Harrison. And the idea, you said that you wanted me to see that you are a family man. And I know that's something that we talk a lot about now. And the idea of that has been just unbelievable to me because I didn't have the experience of a family man. Everything that I knew about family growing up, especially as it related to men, was that there was no sincerity there. There was no dedication. It was all, what can you give? And you can get affection by giving something for it. You can get attention by giving something for it. It wasn't just a person sees it as his responsibility to be a devoted husband and father and provide for his family. Like all of these things are probably very normative values that a lot of society grows up with. I didn't have that. The other part is that being a mother has been so much of my identity since I was 18 years old. And so to have like 20 plus years of experience as being a mother and being a single mother at that, the majority of that time, that was another thing that it was very important to me that you see that I wasn't just here to
hang out with you and spend time with you. I wanted a family.
Sure.
And I think that also, because I did want that so bad, and I never believed that it would be for me. And then I have it, and that brings up the insecurity.
Yes. Again, I think we heard a quote yesterday or earlier today. I can't remember, but it was happiness is the scariest thing because that just means you have that much more to lose.
Exactly.
And I think that resonated with you and you kind of stopped it. And I didn't even hear it initially. You stopped it and you repeated it back to me because it's true. I mean, once you find yourself at a point where you're happy,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you're not used to being able to be happy, and you think, what's going to take this away from me?
Mm-hmm.
Is something going to take this away from me? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is something that you have struggled with the majority of your life, because anything that would have been, brought you happiness before was at a cost.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I wasn't ever even looking for happiness. I was just looking for security.
Right.
And the only way that I was ever able to find security is through myself.
Right.
I mean, even when Willow's dad and I were living together, I was still always the breadwinner, so to speak.
Sure.
And I was the one that worked consistently. I was the one that had the job with the insurance. I was the one that put myself through school while I was working full time, while I was taking care of Willow.
Sure.
And to get to the point where all of a sudden I have this partner, and this partner wants to put forth effort into taking care of me and taking care of Willow while also taking care of your son, our son. That felt very like too good to be true.
Sure.
Sure. And it definitely stirs up a lot of insecurity. And again, I think so much of that insecurity, especially when, we look at complex PTSD, so much of that is a lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
And the other part is, along with complex PTSD, I also have 2 other challenges. I know the clinical word for it would be disorders, but I prefer to think of them as challenges that I very much manage through. But I have obsessive compulsive disorder as well as ADHD. And getting a formal diagnosis for that has certainly been a game changer. It also, getting the right type of medication to address the OCD, I think has helped with that a lot too. I think that has helped take a lot of our arguments down from what could have been like 3 consecutive days to more like an hour to 18 hours,
Yeah, and sometimes we still have those that stretch for a few days here and there. And I think that's not because of the challenges, as you mentioned, but because we feel something within us that isn't being seen or heard. We feel something within us that is not being seen in what we feel is the right light.
Mm-hmm.
And so where we think that we're doing something that is, or we're saying or doing something that is coming from a place of trying to be constructive,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it's perceived as, well, no, I'm just being, or it's an attack, or it's more of a, you think poorly of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case. It's rarely the case where we are thinking poorly of each other at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's more along the lines of, we were elevated in when we said it, and the way that it came out sounds like it's more of a frustration about you rather than a frustration about the fact that we're fighting in that moment. And that fact, that frustration around the fact that we're fighting makes it seem as though we're taking personal jabs, where it's more of a, we are trying to talk through this, and we are, both of our feelings are hurt at the same time. I wanted to go back to what you said about how surprising it was that I was so involved with my family, and how, breath of fresh air and so forth. And I want to take a moment to express, I grew up in a household where it was a single mom. I had a stepdad that was far from the breadwinner. He brought in some money here and there, but he was more of, he was around. He was a good guy, but he wasn't really involved in teaching the children things. He wasn't really involved with our school activities. It was more of he was just there for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there and we would have conversations and we would hang out, but it wasn't a child rearing experience. And then my dad who I love dearly, but was pretty much completely absent through most of my childhood. So when Harrison was born, I was determined that I was going to be the polar opposite of my dad,
Right.
which meant that I was going to do everything I could to be there for him as much as possible. Now, again, I love my dad. He was a good man in a lot of ways. He just wasn't very good at being a parent.
Right.
Well, he wanted to be your buddy. When I got older, he wanted to be my buddy. He wanted to tell me about all the parties he would get kicked out of. He wanted to tell me about all the fun things he did, but he didn't really tell me about what it took to be a functional person in society. He didn't take the time to teach me skills I needed to know in the real world. It was about his days playing music on stage and all of his shenanigans that he got into and so forth. And while those are nice stories to know about my dad, they didn't really help me with growing up, and they didn't help me with being the person that I needed to be once I became an adult. And so all of that fell on my mom. And I've seen that time and time again where single mothers have to do that and have to be the mom and have to be the dad. And my mom very much was that, the best that she could with 3 kids. And I think because of that, I was determined not to be that, and that whoever I was in a relationship with would never have to experience that. And so I have always carried that forward. I've carried that forward since Harrison was born. And am I a perfect dad? Far from it. I make mistakes all the time, but my goal is to always be involved and to learn from my mistakes so that he can grow and I can grow together.
Yeah.
And I want to do that with how we raise Willow. And, she's just a week away now from turning 18.
Yeah.
And we have a lot to work with her on still. Yeah. And that's going to carry on into her early 20s. And I see that, you see that, she knows that. Right now she thinks she knows it all, but she still knows that.
Yeah.
And to me, there's nothing that feels better than seeing our family come together and grow and learn, and seeing her embrace this family, embrace Harrison as her brother, embrace me as her stepfather. What she and I have built in the last 2.5 years is far beyond what I ever imagined. I told you early on that I don't anticipate her seeing me as anything more than the guy who married her mom.
Yeah.
We blew past that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Feels like we're just growing and growing and building a bond that's going to be there forever.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. She sees you as her dad. She relies on you for that. And she trusts you to be there. Her coming in at 2:00 in the morning one night and sitting there on the chair talking to you until 4:00 in the morning at 17 years of age, that's unheard of.
Right.
But you have things of value to say, all those things that you just mentioned about how, your dad would share the fun stories, right? But the things that really matter, the things that really build the character and teach us to have both a good work ethic as well as a good moral compass. Those things were missing. And those things were missing for Willow from her dad. So she has always needed a safe man to be able to talk with about those things. And me too, in a different way, right? But I think so much of the fact that we are able to grow as a family and that our kids are able to get the best versions of us, which of course is always evolving, is the fact that we're willing to hold ourselves accountable.
Sure.
And we're willing to look in the mirror and ask ourselves what's not working, right?
Absolutely.
And we're willing to take their feedback too. Because I grew up in a family where you could not question anything. I would get beat if I questioned anything. If I said, "You're hurting me," to my mom, she would say, "Well, I'll give you something to cry about."
Yeah.
And then she would. And these are things that I very much internalized. And
in my book, I talk a lot about the different forms of abuse that I experienced. And I know we've had this conversation as well, but I think it's worth reiterating here. The physical abuse for me specifically, the physical abuse was probably the least impactful on me. It was the neglect, the emotional neglect, the way that me having basic needs was offensive to my mom. Me crying, me needing physical affection, safe physical affection. Things like that were always something that pet her off, pet her off and then set her off. And so it was almost like she was literally trying to beat submissiveness and obedience into me. And I have very much had a very, strong, semi-rebellious spirit to me, where I am very much wired to question things. I'm very much wired to push against things and to stand up for myself and for other people. And these were things that she very much took offense to because of her own wounds, right? And I think that's the other part that we tend to not talk about a lot is the fact that hurting people hurt people, as we know. And you can only pour from the well that you have been filled with. And so if what you have been filled with is rich with poison, then that is what you are going to spew out. Whereas if we do that self-reflection and we're willing to face ourselves and we're willing to have those open conversations, it's not easy and it is incredibly vulnerable, but that is what helps us to reframe our experience of the world, our experience of the relationship, and the way that we interact with our kids.
Well, as you can see, so much of how we parent and respond to our kids is rooted in what we hold within us. And Chris and I have had some challenging times figuring this out, but we've also had some really beautiful times that evidence how deep connection is not only achievable, it's inevitable when you are willing to do the self-work required to keep showing up. So what do we actually do to make this work? Well, here's what's helped us. We have family meetings, whether that's over dinner or conversations in our den. They can feel awkward sometimes, but they create space for everyone to be heard. And we carve out one-on-one time. I spend time with his son. He spends time with my daughter. And that way they know they're not competing and that we really are a family, regardless of biology. We watch our language for the most part. It's not my kid and your kid. It's our family, our kids. And maybe most importantly, we apologize out loud to the kids and to each other, sometimes in front of the kids. Because here's the thing. Blended families don't need perfection. They need persistence. For me, it's remembering that my job isn't to force closeness with his son. My job is to create an environment where closeness could grow if he chooses it. That's the difference. And from that approach, that closeness has grown. He even has a special name for me now, calling me Nani. And my daughter? Well, as you heard, she has conversations with Chris one-on-one that sometimes go until 4 o'clock in the morning. Hear me when I say this. To get to this point, you don't have to fix every fracture. You just have to keep showing up. So here's where I want to leave you today. Parenting on broken ground doesn't mean we're broken parents. It means we're building something new on soil that once knew destruction. And yes, that is hard, but it is sacred work. To every blended family listening, you are brave. You are doing work that most people will never understand unless they go through it. And your persistence matters. Now, this is only part 2 of this series, and I'm going to be real with you. Where the real and toughest friction often shows up isn't even between step parents and kids. It's with the bio parents. Next time in part 3, we're getting candid about this. We're going to talk about what happens when egos, old wounds, and clashing parenting philosophies collide. We'll talk about the disconnection, the disruption, and what to do when kids feel like they're stuck in a tug of war. So don't miss it, because the truth is, healing families isn't about pretending it's easy. It's about choosing not to give up when it's hard. Thank you for being here with me, and thanks for doing this work with me. I'll see you next time in part 3 of Parenting on Broken Ground.
You've been listening to The Last Generation, Transforming Trauma into Purpose. For more resources, visit traumatopurpose.com. If this episode resonated with you, consider leaving a review and joining the community online. Subscribe, and let's transform together.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.